Someone looked at a luxury motorhome and decided it wasn't intimidating enough. Then they designed this. What you are looking at right now is one of the most visually commanding motorhome concepts I have ever put in front of a camera. The stance alone tells you this thing was not designed to blend into a campsite. It was designed to own wherever it parks. Before we go any further, full transparency up front. This is an AI-generated concept design. No factory, no production line, no showroom. Pure imagination. And honestly, that is exactly what makes it worth analyzing. Because when you remove real-world constraints, you see what design could actually become. Here is what we are doing today. We are walking the exterior, and that front face alone is going to take a minute because there's a lot happening there. Then we are going inside, breaking down what those proportions tell us about the living space, then powertrain logic, and then my honest verdict, including the one thing I would change if I were sitting in the design review. There's also one decision on this roofline that I genuinely haven't seen resolved this cleanly on a concept this size. I'm saving that for the exterior section. Stay with me. Let's start where your eyes already went, the front face. That grille. It is a hexagonal chrome-framed unit sitting dead center on the front fascia, and it is doing three things simultaneously that almost no motorhome concept has attempted before. First, it is communicating supercar DNA. That octagonal border treatment is a direct visual reference to high-end automotive grille language, the kind you see on ultra-luxury sedans, not Class A coaches. Second, it is bordered by a full ring of LED daytime running lights that wrap the entire grille perimeter, which means at night this thing glows like a spaceship from the front. And third, and this is the part I want you to really look at, there's a badge center-mounted in that grille with an X motif, flanked by what appears to be a trident logo above it. That is deliberate brand building embedded directly into the design DNA. Whoever imagined this concept was not thinking about a motorhome. They were thinking about a nameplate. Above the grille, 4 LED clusters are mounted in a horizontal row. These are not round headlight pods. They're rectangular, jewel-set units. The kind of headlight design language takes significant tooling investment in the real world. On a concept with zero production constraints, the designer went extra with them, and it works. Now, step back and take in the full front face proportionally. The windshield is raked aggressively for a vehicle this size, far more than a standard coach. That is not just aesthetics. A raked windshield at this angle reduces frontal drag coefficient meaningfully. For a vehicle that is essentially a rolling brick by aerodynamic standards, every degree of rake on that glass is doing real work. What it means for you sitting in that cockpit is a panoramic forward view that feels less like driving a bus and more like piloting something. The profile. Let's walk it. The overall length here looks to be in the 45-foot range. You can use those dual rear axles as a scale reference, and we'll come back to those. The roofline is where this concept earns real points. It is a clean, unbroken arc from the A-pillar all the way to the rear. No pop-up fence, no awkward transitions, no afterthought AC units bolted on top. There is what appears to be a full-width panoramic roof glass section integrated flush into the crown of the roofline. That is not easy to engineer even in concept territory. The designer chose to solve it rather than avoid it. That decision changes everything about the interior light quality, and we will get to that. Running the full length of the side, roughly at windowsill height, is a chrome accent line, a single unbroken graphic stripe that travels from the front face all the way to the rear. This is a design technique borrowed from yacht design. One continuous line makes a long vehicle look intentional rather than just long. It works here. It really works. The windows. There are 3 side windows visible on the living section, large, dark-tinted, flush-mounted units. Flush glass on a motorhome is a big deal. Standard coaches have rubber gasketed windows that sit proud of the body surface. These are flush. That means the airflow across the side of this vehicle is uninterrupted. Aerodynamically, it matters. Visually, it's the difference between a vehicle that looks assembled and one that looks formed. The underbody storage bays, visible as a row of flush panel doors along the lower skirt, are finished in a slightly lighter graphite than the main body. That tonal separation is subtle and deliberate. It visually drops the perceived ride height of the vehicle, making it look lower and more planted than it actually is. That is advanced surface design thinking. And then are the wheels. Dual rear axle, 6 wheels total. The rim design is a turbine spoke unit, deep dish with what looks like a dark chrome or gunmetal finish. The tire profile is lower than you'd expect on a coach this size, which reinforces the planted automotive stance. Someone spent real time on these wheels. They look like they belong on a hypercar that somehow grew to 45 feet long. Now, that roofline decision I mentioned in the hook, see that flush panoramic glass section sitting at the crown? It's not a standard skylight. Based on the proportions and the flush integration, the designer appears to have treated the entire upper third of the living section as a glass ceiling, not a patch, not a vent, a ceiling. That changes everything about the interior light quality, and that is exactly where we are going next.
Here is where it gets interesting. We do not have interior renders for this concept, and honestly, I think that makes this section more interesting, not less. Because what the exterior tells us about the inside is actually very detailed if you know how to read it. Let's do this properly. Think of it as detective work. First, ceiling height. Those wheels look to be 22 to 24-inch diameter units. Using that as our scale reference, the overall vehicle height appears to be in the 13.5 to 14-foot range. Standard motorhome interior ceiling height is around 6'6" to 6'8". In a vehicle this tall, with the roofline arc we have here, you are likely looking at ceiling heights approaching 7 feet in the center of the living zone. That is not a motorhome ceiling. That is a penthouse ceiling. The moment you walk in, before you even register the finishes, that height is going to hit you. Space communicates before your eyes process detail. Now let's zone this interior. The exterior is approximately 45 feet long. The cockpit occupies roughly the first 8 feet. That leaves around 37 feet of habitable space. Here is how the logic almost certainly divides it, based on window placement and what serious luxury coaches at this scale do with that footprint. The lounge zone sits immediately behind the cockpit. Those large side windows we analyzed on the exterior, their placement suggests the lounge is positioned to benefit from maximum side light. In a concept like this, you're probably looking at a U-shaped or L-shaped seating arrangement that faces inward toward a central living area, with the side glass framing the landscape as moving artwork. That is the experiential logic. You are not traveling through the landscape. The landscape is your view. The kitchen would sit midship, roughly at the longitudinal center of the vehicle. Center placement is logical for weight distribution and for separating the social forward zone from the private rear zone. Based on the proportion of glass to body on the side profile, the kitchen likely has a window over the prep area, which, in a real build, is always the detail that makes a mobile kitchen feel residential rather than galley-like. The sleeping quarter sits in the rear third. Rear placement, away from the cockpit, away from road noise sources at the front, is the standard for serious luxury builds. The rear axle noise is mitigated in a full electric drivetrain scenario. No transmission tunnel, no prop shaft, so rear sleeping in an electric coach is actually quieter than in a diesel equivalent. You would be sleeping above the rear axle assembly, but in a vehicle this tall, the sleeping platform likely sits high enough that the axle intrusion into the living floor plan is minimal. The bathroom. In a 45-foot coach with this height profile, a walk-in wet room is not just feasible, it is expected at this positioning. The gray water system in a concept like this would almost certainly be a multi-stage filtration unit. You are not dumping gray water at a campsite, you are managing it on board, intelligently. Now, that panoramic glass ceiling we identified on the roofline, let's think about what it actually does to the interior. Imagine the lounge zone with natural light falling from above as well as from the side. The light quality in that space on a bright morning would be extraordinary. Warm light pooling across a curved ceiling, moving as the vehicle moves. That is not a feature, that is an atmosphere. The designer understood that luxury is not about what you have, it's about how a space makes you feel. That glass ceiling is the single most impactful interior decision in this entire concept, and it was made on the outside. The cockpit. That raked windshield gives the driver a forward view that stretches low and wide. Digital instrumentation in a concept at this level would almost certainly be a full-width display arc, the kind that wraps from door pillar to door pillar, giving the driver situational data without looking away from the road. In an autonomous highway mode scenario, that same display becomes a content screen. The cockpit transforms from a driving environment to a forward observation lounge. You are still moving, you are no longer driving. That transition from pilot to passenger is the future of long-distance motorhome travel, and this cockpit is built for it. Smart systems. Climate management in a space with this much glass requires intelligent zoning. The panoramic roof alone creates a significant solar gain challenge in warm climates. A learning climate system, one that models the route, the weather forecast, and the occupancy pattern, would be pre-cooling or preheating the rear sleeping zone before you arrive, managing the lounge temperature based on sun angle, and doing it all silently, invisibly, without a thermostat you ever have to touch. This is what the interior of this concept is doing, not showing off square footage, constructing experience. Let's talk about what would actually move something like this, because the exterior gives us real clues. That 6-wheel configuration, dual rear axle, is significant. In a real-world build scenario, that configuration almost certainly implies dual electric motors, one per rear axle. Why? Because at the weight this vehicle would carry, we are talking 30,000 to 35,000 pounds fully loaded, you need torque distributed across multiple drive points, not concentrated at one. Dual motor, dual axle gives you traction management, load sharing, and crucially, redundancy.
If one drive system has an issue, you are not stranded. You are managing on one axle until service. Battery capacity. If this were ever engineered for reality, you would be looking at a pack in the 800 to 1,000 kilowatt-hour range, roughly 4 to 5 times what a Tesla Semi carries, to deliver credible 300-plus mile range at coach weight and highway speed. The closest real-world reference points are the BYD electric articulated coaches and the emerging long-haul electric truck platforms. This concept is beyond both of those in ambition, but the technology trajectory points directly at it. The solar roof integration, that flush glass panel we analyzed, in a real build would function not as a primary power source, but as an off-grid sustainer, running the climate system, the smart electronics, the lighting, the water management, not charging the traction battery, sustaining interior life when the vehicle is parked. That is an honest, practical use of roof solar at this scale. Autonomous highway mode. That cockpit architecture, wide, digital, raked, is not designed for a driver who is always actively driving. It is designed for a driver who is sometimes a passenger. Highway autonomy on this platform would mean the vehicle manages lane keeping, following distance, and route optimization while the occupants live in the vehicle. You are not on a road trip, you are moving through your home while the home handles the navigation. The technology to fully realize this concept does not entirely exist yet, but the pieces, the battery density, the motor efficiency, the autonomy stack, are all on a development curve that points at exactly this. In a near-future production scenario, this is not science fiction. It is an aggressive production roadmap. All right, honest take. Here is where this concept lands for me. What it does genuinely well, the surface continuity. From that front grille to the rear tail, this design has a visual logic that never breaks. The chrome accent line, the flush glass, the uninterrupted roofline arc, every element is speaking the same design language. That is genuinely hard to achieve on a vehicle this long. Most concepts at this scale have one great angle and fall apart somewhere else. This one holds together from every viewpoint you can see in this image. That is the mark of a designer who thought in 3 dimensions, not just in hero shot angles. What seems impractical, that front grille treatment. I love it visually. It's bold, it's distinctive, it's genuinely original. But in a full electric build scenario, you don't need a grille. There's no combustion engine behind it demanding airflow. The designer kept it as a design statement, which is a legitimate choice, but it adds frontal drag with zero functional return. In a real engineering review, that grille would be the first conversation. Keep it as a brand identity element, yes, but it would need to be much more aerodynamically resolved. The most impressive detail, that panoramic roof glass, flush integrated, unbroken from front to rear of the living section. I've analyzed a lot of concepts on this channel. I can't point to another motorhome concept that solved that detail this cleanly. Usually, the skylight is an afterthought, a punched hole in the roof with a frame around it. Here, it reads as a foundational design decision that the rest of the roofline was built around. That is design thinking working in the right order. One thing I would change, the lower body storage panel treatment. Those flush bay doors along the skirt look like they ran out of budget. A subtle pressed surface detail, even just a shadow line, would tie the lower third into the visual richness of everything above it. It's a small change. It would make a significant difference to how the full vehicle reads. What this concept signals about luxury mobility: the future of motorhome design is not about adding more amenities. It's about closing the gap between what a home feels like and what a vehicle looks like. This concept understands that. It's not a bus with nice furniture, it's a residence that happens to move. That distinction is everything. It's a concept, it's fictional, it's AI generated, and it's one of the most visually coherent motorhome concepts I've analyzed on this channel. Now, here is my question for you. That panoramic glass ceiling versus a larger battery pack for extended off-grid range. If you could only have one, which would you choose? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you land on that. If this kind of deep dive design analysis is what you come to YouTube for, subscribing is just the most efficient way to not miss the next one.